She didn't scream when they dragged her from the burned-out farmhouse. She didn't beg when they shoved her to the muddy edge of the river, where the smoke thinned and the world went quiet again. She only looked at the soldier standing in front of her, his uniform torn, his rifle lowered, his eyes far too tired for someone still breathing, and said, in a voice emptied of fear, "Just kill me fast." The words didn't come with tears. They came with relief. That was what stopped him. He had heard screams before. Curses, prayers, promises of revenge, lies meant to buy time. But relief was rare. Relief meant someone had already died inside. He knelt without realizing it, boots sinking into wet soil, close enough to see the bruises on her wrists, the dried blood at her temple, the way her hands shook even as her face stayed calm. She was an adult, no child, but she looked smaller than she should have, folded inward like someone trying to disappear. The war had a way of shrinking people like that. He asked her name. She shook her head. Names had weight, and she didn't want to carry anything anymore. Around them, the forest stood indifferent, sunlight filtering through leaves as if nothing terrible had happened anywhere at all. He had orders, clear ones. No prisoners. No delays, move on. But orders felt thin in that moment, like paper held over fire. He told her to stand. She didn't. Her knees buckled, and she fell back into the shallow water with a splash that sounded too loud in the quiet. That's when he noticed the way she flinched, not from fear, but from pain she was trying desperately to hide. Pain changes posture. It teaches the body to protect secrets. He reached out, hesitated, then gently steadied her. She laughed once, short and hollow, and said it didn't matter anymore. Everything that mattered was already gone. He had heard that too, but never believed it until he saw it written in someone's eyes. He noticed her skirt was soaked dark at one side, not with river water, but something thicker, something that clung. "You're hurt," he said. She shook her head again. "It doesn't matter," she repeated, like a rule she'd memorized to survive the day. He told her it always mattered. That was when she looked at him properly for the first time. Really looked, as if measuring whether he was worth the effort of truth. "Then do it fast," she said again. He didn't. Instead, he asked permission, quietly, respectfully, before lifting the edge of her skirt, just enough to see what she had been hiding. What he saw made his breath catch, not with shock but with recognition. Beneath the fabric, strapped tight against her thigh, was a crude bandage darkened with old blood, wrapped over a deep shrapnel wound that had been ignored for days. Metal had torn through muscle and lodged near the bone. Infection had already begun its slow, merciless work. This wasn't someone waiting to die. This was someone who had been fighting to live long after hope had stopped visiting. And suddenly the war shifted shape. She wasn't an enemy. She wasn't a burden. She was a battlefield all on her own, one that had already taken too much fire. He swallowed, set his rifle aside, and did something that would follow him longer than any order ever could. He chose to help, as he worked, cleaning the wound with water that stung in cloth. Torn from his own sleeve, she watched him with disbelief softening into something dangerous, hope. She told him then in fragments about the convoy that never came, the village caught between sides, the days hiding, the nights bargaining with silence. She told him she had said those words because she was tired of being brave in a world that didn't reward it. By the time the sun dipped lower and the forest shadows stretched, the soldier had made a decision that would change both their lives. And before the chapter of that day closed, before the sound of distant guns returned, he looked at her and said, "If you want to live, you're not doing it alone." If this story has already pulled you in, if you feel the weight of that choice, remember to subscribe, because stories like this are about the moments that change everything, and there are many more waiting. They moved at dusk, when the light softened and the world blurred enough to forgive mistakes. The soldier supported her weight as they crossed the shallow stream, each step careful, each breath measured. She never complained. Pain had become a language she no longer bothered to speak. Instead, she watched him, how he scanned the tree line, how his hand hovered near his weapon without gripping it, how he treated her injury with more care than the war had ever shown either of them. He told her they were heading toward an abandoned aid station marked on an old map, a place most believed destroyed. Belief was a luxury. Survival ran on probability. As they walked, she finally told him why she had said those words by the river. It wasn't just the wound. It was what she had seen done to others. It was the way mercy had become random, how living felt like borrowing time from something angry. She had decided that choosing the moment of her death was the last control left to her. He listened without interrupting, because some truths break if rushed. When they reached the station near dawn, half collapsed but still standing, he tended to her properly, using skills he'd learned for himself and never expected to use for someone he'd been trained to see as the other side. Fever came and went. Infection fought back. For 2 days, the world narrowed to breath and water and waiting. And then she lived. Not suddenly, not dramatically. She lived the way people do when death has already unpacked and been told to. Leave slowly, stubbornly, almost out of spite. When she woke clear-eyed on the third morning, she cried, not because she was weak, but because she was still here. The soldier sat nearby, exhausted, and smiled like someone seeing sunrise for the first time. He told her his name then. Names had weight, but now they could carry it together. He also told her what helping her meant for him. Desertion, punishment, maybe worse. She asked why he did it anyway. He thought for a long time before answering. Because when you asked me to kill you fast, he said, I realized how slow this war had already been killing us. Both. They parted weeks later. When it was safe, when she could walk on her own, when choices returned. She went toward a life rebuilt from fragments. He went into hiding, then into something quieter, something human. Years passed. The war ended the way wars always do, on paper first and people much later. They met once more by chance in a place where no one wore uniforms. She was stronger. He was older. The wound had scarred, but scars are proof of survival. They spoke briefly, warmly, like people who shared a truth that didn't need repeating. And when they walked away from each other that final time, both understood that the moment by the river, the moment when death had been asked for and life had been chosen, had already changed. Everything worth changing. If this story moved you, if you believe in the power of single choices to rewrite entire lives, make sure you subscribe to the channel. These are not just stories. They are reminders that even in the darkest moments, one act of humanity can outlive a war.